In this video, we'll be discussing the historical portrayal of doctors on TV and why Brian Quick chose Grey's Anatomy as his subject of analysis in this study. So Quick's approach to understanding how doctors are portrayed on television comes from Rick Street's ecological model. It tries to take into account the different contexts that impact the provider-patient relationship in healthcare settings. So this model illustrates how media, organizational, cultural, and political legal contexts each impact the doctor-patient relationship. So if you come from a culture that is somewhat suspicious of doctors, you might be more reluctant to go see the doctor. If the organization puts up a lot of barriers, it's too expensive, it's hard to get an appointment, those kind of things, it might affect your relationship with the doctor. And for our purposes, we're interested in that media component, that media context. What does the portrayal of doctors in the media, how does that then go on to impact how people relate to their doctors when they have those interactions? And so historically, television doctors have been portrayed in different ways. So the very first show that dealt with doctors was a show from 1952 called City Hospital. And these very early shows depicted doctors as omnipotent healers. The doctors always knew the answers. Everything they did worked out just fine. They never had any problems. They never made mistakes. They never had patients upset with them. And the doctor was sort of the primary authority figure in the hospital. Whatever the doctor said was the right decision. Everybody just followed along with the doctor's orders. And so during this period from the 50s into the 60s, doctors were portrayed as these compassionate heroes who did everything to help their patients, and they always made the right decisions. And this was kind of similar to how other professions were portrayed at the time. Lawyers, for example, always had made the right choices. Whatever they did was the right call. There was a lawyer show on at this period called Perry Mason. He never lost a case. He always had all the answers. His client was always guilty or innocent. And so this kind of followed a trend in how we portray most professions. And so doctors at this point were these heroes who always did the right thing, never made a mistake, always trying to do what they can to help their patients. By the 1970s, the portrayal of doctors kind of shifts a little bit. And so now doctors were portrayed as being on the cutting edge of medical advances. They, in a similar way to their predecessors, they were shown as always helping their patients. But in this period, you started to see the shift being from always just knowing the right thing and being this heroic person who's willing to do what they can to help their patients. Now they're able to help because they are willing to take risks. They're willing to try new types of procedures that might seem risky but actually end up helping their patients. And so this is the portrayal that you start to see in the 1970s. And then by the end of the 1970s and onward, you start to see a shift from this risk-taking doctor who's still trying to help their patients and always is successful, to more of a focus on the difficulties of being the doctor. So now the experience of being the doctor becomes the focus. Whereas before, a lot of the times, the focus every week was on the patient. So the patient would come in, there'd be this case that the doctor had to solve, and the doctor, you always knew the doctor was going to make the right call, and whatever the doctor did would be the right decision. By the 70s, now they're still doing that, but they're able to take risks. Now, by the 80s, it starts to become about how hard it is to be a doctor. So you get shows like St. Elsewhere and Northern Exposure, leading into the bigger hits of ER, and then of course Grey's Anatomy, that are all about the personal lives, the experiences of what it's like to be a doctor. And so if we're looking at cultivation theory, in the 50s and 60s, the doctors are these omnipotent healers that are the heroes. And so if that's the message you're getting from TV shows and you watch a lot of TV, then that's how you're going to feel about your doctor, is that the doctor is out there to do whatever they can. They're this heroic person that's going to help heal you. And so you'll just accept whatever your doctor tells you because your doctor is always right. They always know what to do. By the 70s, you start to see that shift into the risk-taking doctor. And cultivation theory argue that if that's the perception you're getting from TV, that your doctor is always someone who has to be able to take risks. If you go see your doctor and he or she tells you, oh, well, there's nothing we can do, you might start to feel like, well, but have you tried this new experimental thing? Why aren't you doing some risky procedure that will end up actually saving my life? And so that might change your expectation of what you are getting from your doctor. And by the time we get to the 80s and into the modern era, where mostly it's still the focus is on the doctor as more focused on their personal life, the difficulty, how hard it is to be a doctor, you might start to expect that what the cultivation theory would argue is that if that's the message that you're getting, then there is some sympathy for the doctor. Oh, being a doctor is hard. But there's less of this feeling that the doctor's always going to get it right. The doctor's always going to know what to do, because the doctor is just struggling as a person just like you are. And so Quick is interested in what this message about the doctor kind of means. And he's using this as a case study for understanding cultivation theory as well. So we said in the last video that one of the innovations that he's trying to add into cultivation theory is whether or not one individual show can have that cultivation effect for an audience member. And so he chose Grey's Anatomy because it started airing in 2005. Even by the time of his study, it had been airing for more than a decade or so, and there was a lot of episodes. So you could see, if you had consistently watched Grey's Anatomy, you could have been exposed to a lot of messages about what it's like to be a doctor. And the show's also been very popular. It, in its first season or so, reached as high as number 5. It's been consistently very highly ranked. Even last year, as it's entering into 15 plus years on the air, it was still the number 26 show with about 10 million viewers. And it's very popular among younger people. It's the number 9 show among 18 to 49 year olds. And that's just if 18 to 49 year olds that were still watching it on broadcast TV. That doesn't even come into account the wide number of people that watch it on Netflix and other streaming platforms. And so the show is very popular, so there will be an audience, so lots of people will have watched it. Lots of people will have watched it for a really long time. And so Quick is interested in, will this show have a cultivation effect because it is such a long-running show? And then what will that cultivation effect tell us about how people perceive their doctors?